Halloween has always been one of my favorite nights of the year. I love everything from the pagan origins to the modern version with trick-or-treating, also known as the quest for candy. And then there are also the films a bit kids in disguises. One year my friends and I decided to go get candy like we do every year. Maybe we were a little old for that, but it was our tradition and we always had a lot of fun. We went from house to house collecting candy, despite a few looks from parents who must also think we were a little too old for that. We were a big group and my crush at the time was with us, which made the night even more fun. In this neighborhood, houses often gave out large chocolate bars and almost everyone decorated their house with ultra-fancy Halloween decor. Approaching one of the last houses before returning, I noticed a frightening figure on the lawn. She looked like someone waiting to pounce to scare us when we passed. It was a tall figure wearing a white mask with black masked eyes. It was hard to tell if it was a mannequin or a real person, because she was completely still. As I passed, the figure suddenly grabbed my arm, scaring me to death. The man leaned towards me and told me in a soft, slow voice through his mask, "You are the cat." Then he ran to the back of the house. We all screamed, laughed and ran to the door to retrieve candy. We thought, of course, that he was one of the owners who was part of the animation to scare the visitors. We got our candy and as we left, I turned to the lady at the door and told her that the guy was really scary, but she could tell him not to grab people so hard. She looked at me like I said something crazy. I asked her if everything was okay, and she replied in a nervous voice, "You are the second girl tonight to tell me the same story. My husband is inside and we have no one outside to scare the kids." Officially scared, I ran to my friends, still thinking it might be a joke on his part. We walked around the neighborhood for a while. Eventually, some of my friends separated from the main group, and those who remained decided to go back to my house by passing this house again. We wanted to see if the big guy was going to make another appearance, but this time the whole house was off, like he didn't have any more candy from the sidewalk. I looked around the back of the house and there I saw the same guy in the white mask. He waved to us. My friends told me to ignore him, that he must surely live there and that he was just trying to scare us. But when I was almost home, I turned around and saw that the guy was following us. I yelled at him, "What's your problem?" The group then turned around and tried to avoid him so as not to see him again. My friends started to realize that I was really scared. Once I got home, I felt safer and tried to think of something else. We exchanged sweets, talked and watched some TV. Every now and then someone would joke about my scary big man, and we would laugh about the situation. When my friends left, I got ready to go to bed, and I was in my room taking off my makeup when I looked out the window. And there in my garden was someone. I thought I was hallucinating. I went down to the living room to see myself, and I saw the man in the white mask who was at my back door. Trying to get in, shaking the handle, I shouted to call my father. The man raised his head to me, beckoned to me again just like before. My father ran down and saw the man, who didn't even move. My father called the police, who fortunately arrived in 2 minutes. They arrested the man and took him to their car. I will never forget his face when they took off his expressionless mask. His face seemed even more frozen. He had short, dirty blonde hair, and his eyes didn't even blink. His mouth was closed, without any expression. But just before he got into the police car, he turned his head to me and smiled grimly. A smile that didn't seem to come from someone conscious. A chilling smile. I still think about that Halloween night. As terrifying as this experience was, I'm thankful it wasn't worse. About 10 years ago, when I was 13, I had an experience that I remember like it was yesterday. A few details. First, I was already tall for my age, 1m78, and often taken for a teenager of at least 16 years old. At the time, I was living with my uncle Jared, his wife, their 2 daughters, and my grandmother. Jared had started his own pool cleaning and repair business, right? He had to handle chemicals and heavy equipment for his job, and he was really good at what he did. He's the kind of person that people naturally like. We lived in Southern California in a beautiful area where the weather is usually nice, rarely more than 27 degrees. Even with the changing seasons, many wealthy people live in the area. One of his clients, a middle-aged woman, invited him to a big Halloween party she was hosting at her home. She said her whole family could come. Jared loves Halloween. As much for disguises as for scaring people, which was something we had in common. She had planned a haunted maze in her avocado orchard. So he accepted his invitation and offered me to come help him. Even though parties aren't really my thing, I gladly agreed, especially to work in the haunted maze with him. The party was fun with good caterer food, but I mostly stayed with my family, trying to enjoy the evening, although I was much more excited about my role in the maze, 1 hour before opening. My uncle and I went to get ready. I stopped, that is to change in a free room of the house while I went to the guest house. My role was to distract people from seeing Jared, who was disguised as Michael Myers, equipped with a real chainsaw even though it didn't really fit the character. I was dressed in a rather short Victorian dress, covered in fake blood to give the impression that I had been hung from a tree in the orchard. The small groups entered the maze one by one, and I stood still to attract their attention. Before I could stop, he came out of the shadows with his chainsaw, provoking screams and sending them running away. Everything was going well until I heard male voices. A little further down the path, I got back into position, ready to welcome a new group, amused by the cries of the guests. But this time it was different. I heard 5 voices of men who seemed to be well drunk. The unease began to mount. But I figured it was probably just guests a little tipsy. Then I heard one of them say something like, "Hey, look over there." Another hissed and made inappropriate remarks. My discomfort has intensified. I was alone, and with the light of the spotlights focused on me, I only saw their silhouettes about 5 meters away. Although I was tall for my age, I was still only a child facing 5 adult men, and I was petrified. 2 of them approached me. One holding out his hand saying, "Come on, come have fun with us." I stepped back and told them to leave me alone, having finally found my way. "Don't be difficult," one of them said, dragging on the words. He completely blocked me, and I looked for my uncle, but he was still with the previous group. One of the men tried to grab me, and I hit his hand trying to run away, but they surrounded me. One grabbed me by the arm. In a panic, I was ready to scream at the top of my lungs, hoping that someone in the maze would understand that I was in danger. Then I heard the roar of a chainsaw. It was Jared. The men turned to him, imposing in his orange prison suit, wearing a Michael Myers mask, brandishing a real chainsaw. I had never been so relieved to see someone disguised as a killer. I stopped this advance towards them by throwing them, "What are you doing to my niece?" The men stepped back, visibly nervous. One of them stammered that they were going to leave, and before leaving, gave me a scary smile saying, "I'll see you again, my beautiful," while passing his hand over my belly. He really scared me. My furious uncle threatened them to call the police, but he stopped when I rushed into his arms, in tears, shaken by fear and adrenaline. Once he calmed down, he called my grandmother, and the 3 of us went to talk to the hostess. Unfortunately, without an accurate description of the men, she couldn't do much. I still think about what could have happened if I hadn't been there at the right time. Since then, I sometimes go back to Halloween parties to work in the maze, but never again in full view of the guests. Today my terror tactic is to crawl, like in The Grudge, fast and silent to scare people. For anyone who works in creepy attractions, here are my 3 tips. Never think your role protects you from inappropriate behavior, even in a private event. Always be close to another colleague in case of problems. Stay attentive to what surrounds you. Even if you are there to scare others, it may be you who had to face a scary situation. Halloween was always my favorite holiday when I was a kid. Dress up, eat candy, play pranks, what more could you ask for? But since a certain Halloween night when I was 12, I don't see October 31st the same way. I grew up in a quiet suburb of Denver. Full of families and children my age, my parents had chosen this neighborhood because they are wound and friendly, and they were in general. But maybe no place in our community is completely safe from darkness. Halloween was a big event. Everyone would decorate their house, and the children would spend weeks choosing their costumes and planning their route to pick up the best candy. With my 2 best friends in the neighborhood, Church and Tyler, we loved sorting our loot after a long night of door-to-door. The year I turned 12, we spent after 12 o'clock on Halloween in the treehouse in my garden, preparing our costumes and our itinerary for the night. We decided to dress up as Ghostbusters with homemade pontoon legs that my dad had helped us build. We were impatient, barely able to contain our excitement as we helped each other finish our costumes before leaving at dusk. It was a perfect evening. Josh, Tyler and I left with our parents following closely behind to keep an eye on us. We walked the streets of the neighborhood, ringing doorbells and creating our usual trick-or-treat. At each house, everything went well and our bags filled quickly with candy. After a few hours, we were ready to go home. Josh and Tyler came to my place so we could sort through our loot together. We spilled everything on the floor in the hut and started making piles of chocolate, fruit candy, salty snacks. We were deep in our conversation when Tyler said he needed to go to the bathroom. The toilet was in the house, so he said he'd just go behind a tree at the back of the garden. Josh and I kept our truck waiting. A few minutes passed and Tyler still hadn't returned. We joked that he might have gotten lost, but after 5 minutes we started to worry. The tree he had gone behind was only 20 feet from the hut. It can't take that long. So we got out of the hut and walked cautiously towards the spot where we had last seen him. As we walked through the garden, the wind rose, scattering leaves at our feet. The moon hid behind the clouds. We were halfway to the tree when a heartbreaking scream pierced the night. It looked like Tyler's, but distorted with a brutality I'd never heard before. Josh and I froze, staring at each other. The scream sounded again, terrifying, guttural from the shadow of the tree. We ran inside screaming to call our parents. My dad and Josh's mom ran out and we were crying and trying to explain what we had heard. The adults searched the garden with flashlights, but they found nothing. No sign of Tyler or what had made that awful noise. Josh's mom ran off to Tyler's while my dad called 911. The police arrived, but they found no trace either. Needless to say, the night of trick or treat ended there. Josh's mother stayed with us. As we anxiously awaited news around midnight, we finally heard a knock at the door. It was Tyler, escorted by a policeman. He looked perfectly normal, neither frightened nor hurt. When asked what had happened, he seemed confused. Tyler said he was just going to pee behind the tree and came right back, but we weren't in the cabin anymore, so he assumed we'd gone home without him. We were incredulous. There was no way Tyler could have gone back to the cabin without being seen in that little garden, and clearly heard those screams that seemed to come from him. Tyler witnessed that he had never screamed and had just taken a short break to go to the bathroom. My parents were upset but relieved. We were all pretty scared, so Tyler just went home after that. That night, I slept with the blankets pulled over my head, listening for possible cries from outside, but no sound was heard. The next day, everything seemed relatively normal. We continued to have fun, sorting our candy and telling ghost stories like after every Halloween, but there was a silent awkwardness between us, a sort of unease. Every time we looked at each other, we all knew what we had heard, and we knew it wasn't coming from our friend. Taylor moved out the following year, and Josh and I ended up drifting apart in high school, but we never talked about that night again. I haven't been picking candy for Halloween since. Even now in my 20s, I feel anxious as soon as the sun starts to set on Halloween night. Today, the shadows seem to move in strange ways, carrying inexplicable whispers. No matter who visited my garden that night, I never hope to see them again. This story happened in 2016, during the period of the famous killer clowns who terrorized everyone in the local church. Every year organizes an evening on the theme of Halloween. And my friends, whom I will call Amelie and Clara, and I decided it would be nice to help set up the stands and animate the games after class. On the day of the event, we met because the evening took place a few minutes' walk from our high school. On the way, we noticed a man in a clown costume near a house next to the school. I've always been afraid of clowns, so as soon as I saw it, I was overcome with paranoia. But I tried not to think about it. After all, it was Halloween. There must have been people dressed up to collect candy. Although it was a little early, as it was only 3 p.m, we continued to the field where the party was taking place. We helped prepare everything, and then we dressed up. Everything was going well. We had a lot of fun. Around 7 p.m, there were no more people, so we went for a walk in the city center. and more precisely in an impressively decorated street. For Halloween, my friend Emily absolutely wanted to see her decorations, and Clara and I agreed. We saw skeletons, tombstones, big inflatables everywhere, and we were fascinated by it all. It took us a moment to notice that the same clown from earlier was standing near a fake tombstone. His hair was bright orange, and his mask appeared to be covered in layers of awkwardly applied makeup. Her clothes were black and mocked with a huge black and white polka dot collar. I was quite uncomfortable at the time, but Amelie and Clara found it fun to provoke him by making fun of his costume. I said, "Girls, don't do this, we should go." They finally gave in to my pleas, and we started going in the opposite direction. A little further away was a shop, and then a little further away was a cafe. But between the two was a long path through a wooded area, poorly lit and really scary. When night fell, Clara suggested, "Why not stop by? At least we don't run the risk of getting knocked over." Amelia joked that it wouldn't happen anyway. We got on the road, talking about everything and nothing, girl stuff like the boys you liked or the people you couldn't stand. That's when we heard footsteps approaching quickly behind us. Turning around, we saw the same clown as before. But this time, instead of standing there staring at us, he was running towards us at full speed, brandishing what appeared to be a butcher knife above his head like a madman. We started running as fast as we could towards the party. He was gaining ground quickly, but miraculously he tripped over a branch. When we turned around, he was slowly rising from the ground. We didn't lose a second and kept running. When we arrived, we explained what had happened to our pastor, who immediately called the police. An officer came to take our statements and searched the area. He found nothing but the knife the clown had left where he had fallen. Our pastor took us home because we were too scared to stay outside. It may not be the most terrifying of stories, but it's one that has stuck with me for years. I am 22 years old and still have a fear of clowns. One chilling Halloween in 1999, I was a 22-year-old bartender in Morgantown. Halloween weekend was always chaotic, with seniors celebrating big. We hosted costume contests, aired horror movies, and served themed cocktails at the bar. That Saturday brought a mix of locals and university attendees, making it one of our liveliest nights ever. And Halloween was always a big event for students, especially seniors who were old enough to buy alcohol, and we had costume contests and cocktails on the theme of horror. We used to show horror movies on bar TVs. It was a big event, but since Halloween fell on a Saturday, that year the local crowd would mingle with the university crowd with the students. So the evening was going to be pretty lively, one of the biggest Halloween parties the bar has ever seen. Naturally, I was very excited to experience this evening. So imagine my disappointment when on the same day, my boss calls me to ask me a favor. My boss and his associate owned various bars and restaurants, and one of them was in the Fairmont, about 15 miles south of Morgantown. They had met at staff class this Saturday, October 31st, and my boss asked me to go there to work in the evening. As a bartender, I could have said no, asked her to see with someone else. But I knew that doing him such a favor would put me in a very good position when it came to asking for Christmas time off, so I said yes. I chose the most stylish shirt and pants I could find, since the place was way more posh than the bar where the work is. And I went to work around 3:30 to set up their bar. I figured it wouldn't be so bad because the place closes around 11 p.m. and the kitchen staff told me everyone usually leaves around 11:40 p.m. I figured I could drive home and then walk to the bar to enjoy the final hours of Halloween in person. My shift is longer than expected, but when it finally ended, I jumped in my car and drove to Morgantown. What I should have done was take Route 79 again, as I had done in the past. But this time I was in Fairmont. Taking Route 79 would have meant retracing my steps. I initially believed Route 19 would be faster, but afterward opted for a different path, which probably wasn't desired. Nothing to say for people who don't know the area, so let's just say I took a shortcut. But that choice turned out to be a big mistake. The roads were much more winding and much less well lit, so every time I was paying attention to the road and trying to maintain my driving, I didn't feel too safe. I drove about 80–90% of the way to Morgantown, always driving carefully. I was super focused, paying attention to the road, telling me it was dangerous when suddenly a car appeared in my headlights. She was on the side of the road, on a patch of grass. She didn't move, and the passenger door was open. A man approaches the passenger door, glances at me briefly as I pass him. A look that makes me think he might need help. I could have kept driving, pretended I didn't see anything, and drove back to Morgantown. But part of me knew I was going to feel like a real coward the next day, letting someone stray on the side of the road and thinking only of me. So I slowed down, turned around, and came back to see if the guy really needed help. I'm not going to lie to you. It occurred to me that turning back might have been a bad idea. It was Halloween after all, the scariest night of the year. But I figured if I pulled over and the guy looked like an axe murderer, I could just back up and drive off before he turned my skin into a mask or something. I knew the person was wearing some kind of white short-sleeve shirt, so I'm going to look for it when I approached to see it through my headlights. But when I stopped, it was gone. There was someone in the passenger seat of the car. I kept some distance, opened my car door and leaned out. I called her to see if she was okay. She didn't answer. She kept looking away as if she couldn't hear me. She seemed fine, so I got out of my car and went to her. But with every step I took toward the car, I realized that something was wrong with the woman I was looking at. There was something in that look, that half-awake, glassy look. And before I even opened the door, I realized that she might not even be conscious. I realized that if I had parked my car at a different angle, I would have seen it long before I approached her. But I had to wait until I was close to the car where I could almost touch her to realize she was dead. Someone had stabbed her again and again in the stomach, then in the thighs. His t-shirt was a dark color that didn't show it, but his jeans were completely soaked with blood. I couldn't believe what I was watching for a second. I mean, there was so much blood coming out of the seat and onto the floor of the car. I don't know if that's where she was killed or if someone put her on the seat like that. But I remember she looked incredibly peaceful, not peaceful like she was happy, but peaceful like she chose to give up at some point. I remember being frozen for what seemed like a good few seconds. That maybe that's because my mind was pumping with adrenaline that made it feel like it was longer than it was. Because I sure as hell stood there too long. Then another thought occurred to me. Where was the man I had seen? The one with the white shirt. I still remember how that question sent chills down my spine. I'm not just saying this to say how scared I was. Yes, I was scared, but I could really feel it. It was like I could really feel the terror running through me. And when I turned back to my car, I prayed I wouldn't see him near the car. Don't let him stand there blocking the road. Before I escaped, I couldn't see it, but you must remember that I left my car running with the lights on. And you know, I was looking at the dark spots around the headlights thinking they might be right there and I couldn't see it. Just looking over my shoulder made me feel incredibly vulnerable and weak. So I went back to the car, but then I saw something that startled me. There was a tree line just 15 meters from the car, and even with my night vision ruined by the glare of the headlights, I saw something pale moving between the tree trunks. It was the man in the white shirt, that was for sure. He was watching me in the dark. I'm still not 100% sure it was really him, but I didn't stick around to find out if my worst suspicions were true or to check if he stabbed that poor girl. There was no telling what he would have done to me to eliminate a potential witness. I ran to my car and put my escape plan into action. I felt a deep relief when I pressed the accelerator pedal. Needless to say, I didn't go out that night. I drove back to my apartment, called the police, and stayed on the phone waiting for them to arrive. Then I told them what I had seen, what kind of car I thought it was, what the woman looked like, the exact stretch of road I was on at the time, and once they were done taking notes, they passed them on to their superiors, and from what I could understand, the purpose was to get another patrol car out of town to find the place I was talking about. And since it was Halloween weekend, the department had no one available. So they asked me if I could take a ride with them to show them the exact place where I found the car. If I had gone off track, chances were my car would have left tire tracks. What if they really had to make a murderer? The types of tires used on the car could make the difference between a conviction and an acquittal, and that's why they needed my help. They weren't looking for the car so much. They thought she had already fled the crime scene. But they needed the exact location where she was, where she might have been arrested, so they could possibly take a tire print. Once this was explained to me, I had no problem giving my time. If my testimony was going to make a difference in this story, catch a man or let a tour go free, the choice was obvious. So I followed the cops to their car. I climbed into the back seat of their Digger. They were right that the car would not be there anymore. But I managed to retrace my steps, so to speak, until I found the corner of grass and tree where the car was. We waited there for a while until another unit showed up to secure the area. Then I ended up being taken back to my apartment. But what if it was after all the bars were closed? And let me tell you, I've never needed a drink so much in my whole life. Luckily, my colleagues and boss were still at the bar where I worked and hung out after closing time and enjoyed a few drinks together. I stopped. They let me in, and I told them I had a great scary Halloween story to tell them. That night, I was treated to a few free beers that did a great job of detaching me from the story. But going back to my apartment alone was another story. I didn't have a nightmare about finding this woman again, but I thought about it for a long time. Thereafter, the police only called me once to confirm some details about the car and the guy I had seen. But after that, I heard nothing more about it apart from a few articles in the local papers. And I still think about it today, especially around October and November every year. I still wonder if the cops caught the guy, if he really killed the girl, or if he just tried to take her to the hospital after someone else attacked him. Sometimes I think I really see a ghost every Halloween, but not in the sense that people hear it. I'm not haunted by a translucent spirit floating in the dark corridors. I'm rather haunted by this woman's gaze, the one that gives the impression that she had stopped clinging to life, the one that gave her peaceful air. As if death no longer frightened him. When I was 11 years old, I went on a candy hunt on Halloween night with two of my friends that I will call Tom and Jerry. It was towards the end of the night, and most of the candy hunters had already gone home, and we decided to visit one last house before heading home. At home, the house looked desolate, abandoned for years, yet a glowing jack-o'-lantern sat on its porch. What could we have expected then? Knowing we were making a mistake, we decided to continue. There was a bunch of scratches on the front door. But before we could knock on the door, we heard a loud cry from inside the house. It wasn't a distorted scream coming from a decoration. Now, would have said one. The creaking door opened slowly, revealing chilling darkness. And a scrawny hand, and, out of the darkness, reached out to us. We then heard what sounded like a witch's laugh. My friends and I ran away from the house, hearing footsteps running after a haunted voice calling, "Take the candy, dear children," and we rushed up to the house. Tom and I didn't know if we were still being followed. Chirit and I then decided to stay the night because we didn't want to take the risk of going out again. Around 2 a.m., I awoke to the same eerie laughter. I saw something at the bedroom window and woke Tom to see it too. Tom then spoke nervously. "Looks like one." Egg, thinking someone was throwing eggs at his house. We both went downstairs and immediately noticed that one of the windows facing the street was broken. Tom's parents weren't home at the time, Jerry. He then hurried on the stairs. "What's going on?" I heard someone laughing outside. Outside, a disembodied voice called out loudly, "Have you forgotten your candy, children?" We rushed to the nearest window and saw a woman with the pace, disturbed take one, pumpkin on Tom's porch, and the thrown at the door of the woman. She started screaming. In chaos, she charged like an unhinged person toward the front door, banging and kicking frantically. We, overwhelmed by the alarm, fled through the back door and sprinted straight to my house, which was only a pie away. From there, we woke up my father and told him what was going on. He called the police. The police arrived shortly afterwards, but they did not find the mad woman. The day after all this, November 1st, Tom called me. "Hey man, this time she left sweets on Poc Xavier. There was a note that said I had to eat them." My parents have me taken to the police station. They found it. Lots of bucks in all. Candy. I also heard the cops talking to my parents, and I heard something about finding bodies in the old house we went last night. On the subsequent Halloween night, that house was demolished. In its basement, knives, ropes, and tapes were uncovered, alongside chilling mysteries. The elusive culprit appeared 2 years later, dreading in the woods behind. This warning is to all listening. Please stay vigilant. Be careful this Halloween and always check your candy. This story took place many years ago. I was a kid, I think I was 11. I remember on Halloween every year I would go on a candy hunt with friends. This year, my friend Tyler and I had planned to spend the night with him and then hang out at my place. My house is big enough. We had a cool basement with a big TV to play video games or watch movies. We called our friend Alex from school earlier today. He planned to come that night, but he had to go do Halloween with his sister, so he didn't come with us for the candy hunt. In the evening, Tyler and I went all over our neighborhood and beyond to the surrounding neighborhoods. We stayed out until about 9 p.m. and got tons of candy. Then we walked back to my house, to the house where my parents were. Tyler and I went down to the basement and played video games while waiting for Alex to arrive. This was before the days when all kids had cell phones, so we didn't know exactly when they would be there. We left the back basement door unlocked so he could come as soon as he arrived, even though my parents were watching a movie upstairs. And we had been in the basement for about 20 minutes when we heard the back door open and close. It was on the edge of the room we were in, and we assumed it was Alex coming in. I called him from where we were and told him to join us, but I didn't hear Alex answer me. I got up and went in the hallway by the back door. There was nobody there. It was weird because I was so sure I heard the door open that I went back to ask Tyler if he heard the door too. He told me that yes, he had heard exactly the same thing as me. So I looked all around the basement one more time, but there was no one there. Maybe it was Alex who opened the door but decided to go to the front or something. Who is this? Eventually I went back to playing video games with Tyler. 5 minutes later, I thought I heard someone walking down the hallway. Then I heard another door open and close. Where we were completely out of sight of the back door of the hallway where there are guest rooms. It was as if the door of one of the bedrooms had slammed. I got up and approached, which allowed me to see that one of the doors was closed. I couldn't remember exactly if it had been opened or closed before, but I was pretty sure it was open. I was a little scared and went back to talk to Tyler about it. That's when I heard the back door open and close again. Then I heard Alex's voice. I went out and saw him standing in the doorway. When he saw my face, he asked me what was wrong. I didn't say anything until the three of us were in the living room, and we told him everything that had happened. I made the decision to seek out my parents and reveal everything that transpired. However, before I could proceed, we noticed the sound of the back door being opened and then closed again. Heading out, I discovered the once shut bedroom door was now fully ajar. Rushing to the back door, I immediately locked it and hurried upstairs to inform my parents. My father then went downstairs to inspect the area. After a thorough check, he returned saying he found nothing unusual. To this day, I never figured out who might have entered the house that fateful night. but the thought still sends shivers down my spine.